Hello, lords and ladies of the realm. It is I, Emily Sophia, and I am here to break it down for you guys something that's a little bit familiar, a little bit brand new. I'm going to be looking at Telltale Games' latest Game of Thrones episode, Iron from Ice. So I'm really excited to be doing another game review. If you want to check out, when you're done with this video, any of my other previous gaming vlogs, there's a link in the description, as well as links to my other Game of Thrones related videos. Now, I've dabbled a little bit in the past with reviewing some of Telltale Games episodes. However, I wasn't really able to faithfully keep up with discussing those, but I hope to maybe attempt that with this Game of Thrones series, which I was both apprehensive about and excited about, and I was really pleased with the way that this first episode went in terms of its slaughtering my soul. And I forgot just how painful this entire universe was to me. This variety of pain was, you know, the one that accompanies the Game of Thrones universe is one that is uniquely felt. And even with watching stuff like The Walking Dead, I had long forgotten this variety of agony. So for those of you who have played the game, I hope that you know exactly what I mean. For those of you who haven't, the beginning of this review is going to be spoiler-free, such that I can tell you whether or not this game is worth playing. So, spoiler-free at the beginning, and then we will dive into the spoilers thereafter, and I will do my best to give you kind of an analysis of the game and discuss the decisions that I made in my playthrough. And well, to qualify, I technically played with my brother. He was at the helms, at the controls, and I was right there with him, and we were kind of tag teaming the decision-making process, so I will explain the things that we did in our playthrough. And yeah, so let's get to it. So, if you have not played this game before, there are two things to be aware of when you are coming into it. First and foremost, are you familiar with the canonical Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire literature? Be that the show or the books. Basically, this game takes place kind of around it starts around the end of the third season of HBO's Game of Thrones television series. And I will warn you that there is a bit of a learning curve if you're not already familiar with the basic events of the Game of Thrones universe and what is going on in the world of Westeros and all the houses within. So you know how if you're filling out a job application and it says like 2 years of customer service or cash handling experience preferred but not required. I would say that when it comes to this game, experience with Game of Thrones, the show and or the books, is preferred but not required. I mean, if you're willing to try your best to pick up the pieces and figure out the broader context of what's going on, you really can connect with the characters, and the game doesn't make it too difficult to figure out who's who and who's related to who. And you know, there's a little bit of exposition and things to kind of bring you back in or to reorient you if you've already seen the show or read the books. So I just want to put that out there, that I think that you will maximize your ability to enjoy the game by being familiar with Game of Thrones. In general, it's really a game that's kind of made for the fans, but I don't think that that necessarily means that if you're not familiar with Game of Thrones, this can't be a starting place for you. It's just that it would spoil some especially critical events in the story as a whole, and I would encourage you to come into things either familiar with Game of Thrones if you don't want those spoilers, or just ready to kind of figure out like, okay, where do these characters sit in this world and what's happened so far. That brings me to point number 2. Now, those of you who are familiar with Telltale Games story-based adventure games, you're gonna know the basic mechanics of this Game of Thrones game. If you've played, say, their Walking Dead series or The Wolf Among Us, basically it's the game is tailored to how you play, and it's all about strategically making decisions in order to reap the best possible outcomes for your characters or for the characters that you want to support. You get to talk with all kinds of characters and make choices. Some of them are timed. Some of them you get to sit and ponder what could be the possible consequences and outcomes, etc., etc. So it gets in your head, and you get into the story by the story getting in your head, because you are actively participating and the things that you do have some bearing on the events to come. Granted, if you're looking for like the mechanics of warfare, action, and all that stuff, most of the action sequences in the game are done through quick time events. My brother and I played the game on PC, so basically, you know, you have to press the crap out of Q and E and other light keys in order to get yourself out of sticky situations and do them at the right time and the right intervals, etc. So really, the action sequences are pretty simple unless coordination is an issue for you, but which it might be. You know, it happens. Anyways, so because I've seen some of the critics, when they talk about this game, they're like, oh, you know, there's no puzzles, there's no, like, the warfare sequences are so blah, blah, blah. But that's just not the way that Telltale Games does things, at least when it comes to these kinds of series. Series like The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, and now Game of Thrones as well. So just be prepared for a story-driven adventure rather than your traditional kinds of puzzle games, warfare-based games. This really isn't of that caliber, which I think is really cool, because if they made a game that was more oriented towards destruction and like a fighting game of Game of Thrones, then it would just pretty much become a giant bloodbath. Which is not to say that there is no spilling of blood in just the story-based game, mind you. But I like the approach that Telltale Games has taken to this game. And it's nothing brand new to their style, so I'll tell you that much. They've kind of already pioneered this genre, and they're just kind of exploring different moods and atmospheres and settings and environments within that genre. So those are a couple things to be aware of. Awareness of the Game of Thrones story, the broader story and lore, and awareness of the story-based adventure style mechanics. So keep all of that in mind. Now, all that being said, I think that if you can get beyond those two elements, you are going to enjoy this game like nobody's business. Enjoy it in the sense that the stress that you feel for the characters that you play as, and there are multiple characters that you are that you're playing and making decisions for, you will feel the stress and the vexation and the woe. And I mean, Telltale, they certainly capitalize on their ability to draw out an emotional response from their players, and that was indeed felt on my part. Within like the last 15 minutes of this first chapter, my heart was palpitating itself to kingdom come and back, and I feel pretty awful about how things went. And now I'm sitting and questioning, did we make the right choices? Like, do we go forward with the choices that we've made? Were these things going to happen regardless? Was it just a matter of how? Basically, things did not go so well for a couple of my characters in this first chapter, and that does not bode well for what's to come. But I'm glad that the writers of this Telltale game were as fearless as George R.R. Martin himself, as well as the showrunners of HBO's Game of Thrones. They're definitely not afraid to take people away from you. The characters that you're playing as, the leading protagonists, they've got no qualms about bringing demises to people who you think just might be sticking around. Life is full of surprises, is it not? So yeah, it is a very engrossing and fun game, very well written. It connects very well into the Game of Thrones universe, I think, by focusing on one of the houses that was not really explored in the show. So it's able to to sort of run along with the timeline that many of us are familiar with, while not necessarily just rehashing territory that we've already tread as viewers of the show and readers of the book. It really fits a nice little niche that I think a lot of people were afraid it would not. But it was good. It was really good, and I liked it. I would love to hear your thoughts as we go. So we're kind of tipping over into the ravine of spoilers now because I can't really hold back. So I took some notes on my phone, and I'm going to refer to those as I go because I was trying to keep track of the decisions that we were making as we went. So, and for those of you posting in the comments, if you're posting about the decisions that you made in the game, please preface those with spoilers. You know, I would just say, like, what kind of spoilers, put those in little asterisks, whatever, and then tab down a couple of lines, enter, just so that way people's eyes don't accidentally start reading what you're talking about. Because I really want to know what decisions you guys made, because I'm sitting here totally floored, and I just want to know. I need to know. How many different roads were there? How many different outcomes? Was this all gonna happen anyway? Okay, so without further ado, if you haven't played the game yet, come on back to my review once you have, and we shall discuss. So, things begin with, there are three major characters that you play as in this game. First of all, you're a squire to House Forrester, who are bannermen to the Starks. And your name is Garrett. And at the very beginning of the game, of course, we start at the scene of the crime that is either unfolding or just unfolded, the Red Wedding, which I was really scared they were going to take us back through that whole experience again. And I was like, this is not a case of PTSD. This is not a can of worms that I want to reopen and re-experience. It has taken many months of healing and stages of acceptance for me to get to a point where I don't curl up in a ball and cry as I seep through the floorboards and into the infernos of hell. It's taken me a long freaking time. Don't do it to me again. And they didn't. So, but we know that, you know, they're just like, yeah, by the way, this is where the Red Wedding is going on. So, Forresters, arguably the good guys if you are a fan of the Starks in the show or books. And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the North, and long live the Starks, long live Ned, except not. But anyways, so you begin, and you are a noble squire, and the approach that my brother and I decided to take with this character is we're going for a lawful good. Quite possibly even lawful stupid, which we really seem to have carried out through each of the members of the Forrester family that we played as. And now it's like, I remember how things are supposed to go. If you cannot match the ruthlessness of the world around you, then you shall eat its dust, okay? So an epic battle breaks out between the Forresters and the Freys, and you are launched quite literally into the fray. Lord Forrester dies, and he passes off his sword to you to bring back to Ironrath and to, you know, honor and nobility and the generations and legacy, blah, blah, blah. He really likes you. Beforehand, he gave you a little promotion, which you were supposed to keep on the DL, and we had our character, our version of Garrett do so. And then he sneaks away into the forest, having witnessed all this destruction, and he's heading back along the path to find his home and father, who is in very dire straits by the time that he arrives there. So the Whitehills, I believe, were the men who had attacked his father and sister. And I mean, we let one of the guys go, showed him mercy. The guy was like, you know, I have no issue with you, and I have a family, and da 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 da. Everybody's got a family. You know, like, that's always the afterthought for so many of these people making their shitty decisions. They're like, but my family. It's like, were you not thinking about that before all of this transpired? I mean, I get it, and that's definitely a pervading theme of this issue is how far are you willing to go for family, and what role does wanting to help your family play in the decisions that you make and in the favors that you ask for. that was something that was very, very tricky to deal with, especially with the character of Mira, who's at King's Landing. But anyways, so Garrett has to watch his father die, and everything sucks, and he's gonna get vengeance, and all that good jazz. Yeah, so he heads back to Iron Wrath, which is the Forresters' stronghold, and you get to, you know, you get to get patched up by the Maester at Iron Wrath, Maester Ortengrin, I believe is how you pronounce it. So you get to look at the Forrester family tapestry there, and you get to kind of become acquainted with the different figures and faces, some of whom you will actually play as later. And then we discover that in light of the death of Lord Forrester, there is to be a new lord of the Forrester clan, that being Ethan, the third born in the family line, and he is quite young, and everybody's kind of like, well, we'll see what happens with this kid, but he's the Lord, and we defer to the Lord, and long live the Lord, and Garrett's kind of like, well, what's going to happen to me in this process? And ultimately, he gets sent to the wall because nobody loves him, and you know, he feels that his place is among the Forresters, but we'll see what the outcome of his being sent to the wall is, and inevitably he's going to run into Jon Snow, I would assume. Also very cool that that the Telltale people were able to get the likenesses and the voices of the characters from the show, so it all just really nicely folds into the series that we're familiar with, and you know, the nostalgia kicks in, and I'm very anxious to see where things are going to go in the upcoming season of the show. Also really funny is that at the beginning of the game, they do their own version of the iconic title sequence, the da 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 da, you know, all that good jazz. And granted, it's a little bit low fidelity. It's kind of laughably silly looking compared to what they do in the show, but I still love the sort of comic book aesthetic of the Telltale games, and that's something that I enjoy. So, you know, and it was interesting to see the fusion of art styles in crafting this world that we're introduced to in this episode. There's a fusion of, you know, their classic animation style and graphics, and then also some paintings that are used as well, such as of King's Landing and Iron Wrath itself. Very, very beautiful, gorgeous work. So it's kind of a synthesis of art styles are needed to create this environment, and I'll be curious to see what else they're going to toy with in the future. Anyways, going back to what's happening at Iron Wrath. So before we even meet Ethan, we know that everybody's really apprehensive about him coming into power, but that's simply the way of things, the way that things have been done. Not just anybody, it's not a merit-based system, at least not at this point. It's all about following the bloodline, and there are consequences for heritage and for you know, continuing the ways of the past, as we do see. So we know also that Ramsay Snow is on the way, and things are about to get shaken up a little bit in this little snow globe. And so then, in light of all this, you are sent away. You get to speak with your uncle, Malcolm, shortly before you are sent on your way, talking about how the North Grove can never be lost, and there's something very, very mythical and secretive about the North Grove, and you are not to have told anyone else about it. We did not have our character do so, so we'll see exactly what role this place is going to play in the future, but we know that it's something that needs to be protected, so that's just kind of out there on the periphery at this point, but I think it's going to become something major, at least by the end of this season. And so, where does that take us next? So then we get to switch to Ethan Forrester, and we see that he is still very much child, but at the same time, you have the opportunity to show him as a young man who wants to come into his position of authority with grace and dignity and blah, blah, blah. So we're also trying to play Ethan as a very, very noble type. At the same time, having him ask questions whenever he possibly could, because I think it's important to realize that, you know, he's just a kid, and he's trying to learn the ropes, and part of exercising power in a good way and to a good extent, is to have faithful counsel. And so by getting to ask all of the elders around you, you know, hey, who should I pick for this position, and what do you think I should do? And you get to kind of see different styles of leadership and then forge a legacy that is your own. So I think that's what's cool about getting to play as Ethan Forrester, despite the danger that we find him in at the end of the episode. And we see, after his little scene with, what's it, Ryan and Talia, his siblings in the forest, Lord Whitehall arrives, and he ain't so happy, so you have to go and deal with that guy. And then you switch over to Mira Forrester at King's Landing, and we come to discover that she has a very close friendship with Marjorie Tyrell. And that could spell out a possible avenue of protection for the Forresters, who are about to get their pooch screwed over in epic fashion. So the question is, will Mira's alliance and companionship with Marjorie lead to any form of protection for the Forresters and in everything that's to come? Can she plea on their behalf to Joffrey or Cersei or the, you know, the wonderful powers that be in the land of King's Landing? And so we see very soon that Mira is being summoned into the presence of Cersei to offer a sort of a formal apology for the Forresters serving under the seditious Starks. And then we see the things that are to come from that interaction. Now, this was one of the most powerful scenes in the episode to me, because Cersei is a freaking beast, and you cannot say anything that will not set her off in the slightest. Because if you are a little bit too ready to bend the knee to Joffrey and all hail the king, she starts to indicate signs of skepticism about that. Like, oh really? So you're also a traitor, because you're betraying your old alliances so readily. And then kind of seeing that as a ruse, you know, like if you're groveling a bit too much, like, oh yeah, you all the way, everything you're all about, I'm all about it as well. Not to worry. We'll watch the same shows, same movies, you know, eat the same food. Like, you get into that zone, and you're also setting off Cersei. But at the same time, if you're straight up like, yeah, I'm faithful to my family and my family alone, that's not gonna make her happy either. So there were moments in our meeting with Cersei where we got the reaction of like, Cersei is pleased, and it's like, yes, that is exactly what we want. And then Cersei is she's not having any of that. And it was scary. It was really, really scary, because in our interaction, you know, she seemed to exhibit signs of thinking that Mira herself is a traitor to her own kind. And that was really scary. I mean, whew, I was getting a little bit hot and bothered. A little hot and bothered. Meanwhile, Tyrion's kind of sitting back and sipping on his wine and just watching Cersei snipe this poor girl, and he later offers her his hand in whatever aid that he can provide, while at the same time noting that there's a risk from taking help even from him. But yeah, so the question is, are the Lannisters going to get the Ironwood from the Forresters? Will that offer them some form of protection? Ultimately, what we ended up having Mira do in that critical moment where she can ask for help from Marjorie is we asked her to, on the behalf of Mira's mother, make a plea to Joffrey for the protection of the Forresters against the Boltons. And it was kind of a last minute thing, so I was like, we know Joffrey, and this kid is not going to be inclined to do anything that's good for anybody else but himself. This much is clear if you've seen the show. But that we just kind of went for something that was a bit more subtle and diplomatic. And I'm feeling now that we should have gone for perhaps something a bit more militant, but at the same time, there is that little servant boy who's kind of running around, and he's like, I've got people. And now I'm like, you got people? The more the merrier. Come on, bring them on in. Let's have a party. But yeah, so we could see that Marjorie was quite conflicted in that she supports and likes Mira, but at the same time, it's a heck of a lot to ask, especially in this precarious position that she has, where she does not yet have power, but she has the power to influence as the potential queen. Now, I'm curious how much this series is going to run up against the Purple Wedding, you know, when that's going to come in the timeline of events, and even how many seasons might come from this game. I mean, well, it could be a little difficult to sustain, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. I also have to say that the eyebrows on Marjorie in this game were just, oof. I was straight up just calling her eyebrows, because she would walk in and she just had this like, shh, like V for Vendetta freaking right on her face. I was like, oh man, oh I messed up, oh I'm dead, oh goodbye. I will kiss your feet and the ground that you walk on. Please don't make that face at me. So much intensity, but that is the nature of King's Landing, you know? So meanwhile, we see that Garrett is on his way to the wall, and yeah, he has a potentially very unsavory encounter with Ramsay Snow, who is on his way to the Forresters at Iron Wrath with his men. And you get to stumble across his latest work, which he says is not his finest, but clearly it was pretty effective, all right. Then we cut back to Iron Wrath and Ethan, who is called upon to decide the fate of this thief and deserter, and we decided to send the guy to the wall, because basically you had to choose between granting him full mercy, sending him to the wall, or taking 3 of his fingers. Now the difficulty is that we could tell that the crowd is crying for justice, and everybody wants justice, and that's also what Whitehall was wanting as well, and I don't know that I elaborated on my experience with that guy, but it was most certainly unpleasant. Sorry for the awkward editing blip. My camera decided that it wanted to stop recording. So anyways, I was trying to say that we decided to send the thief to the wall because it's a way of enacting justice without directly inflicting violence, and I don't really know if this guy is going to be important in the future, so maybe that wasn't the best decision, but who freaking knows? Literally everything you say is a double-edged sword in some sense. If not, at least it's a sword to somebody, if not a double-edged sword is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so then we find out that we have to pick a second in command for the confrontation with Ramsay Snow, choosing your sentinel, and basically you're having to go between Sir Royland and Duncan. We did end up choosing Duncan because the guy seemed a bit more level-headed, but in hindsight, perhaps it would have been good to have somebody equally as hot-headed and dangerous as Ramsay in confronting Ramsay, which Sir Royland, I think, certainly would have been prepared to act out. And I want to know, did any of you guys actually end up picking Royland? And if so, were you able to prevent demise at the end of the episode? Because we went for Duncan because he wanted to use cunning, and we decided that we weren't going to bargain. We were going to use diplomacy, and I mean, whatever. What are we thinking? I mean, I feel that we were a bit rusty on the mechanics and the ethics of the Game of Thrones universe, because none of that panned out as planned, and everything, in fact, went horribly and terribly and violently wrong. So, the best laid schemes of mice and men go often awry, and yeah, that was certainly the case with me, and I really don't like that. But yeah, so, and we also decided to send Ethan's, or the uncle of Garrett, to send him off to go get Asher, who is across the Iron Sea, and I guess he exiled himself to Essos. So yeah, but he thought that Royland would be the best pick, whereas I think Talia was saying that Duncan was the best, and we went with Duncan, and you know, the boys decided to bicker it out at the small council meeting, but stuck with our guns, man, stuck with our guns, and guns actually would have been a really nice thing to have in this situation. But yeah, so difficulties abound. And then things jump back to Mira, who's talking with Sarah. Now, we did actually have Sarah present when Mira spoke with Marjorie about seeking help from Joffrey and protection of the crown for the Forresters. And we're playing it really nice with her because there is just no way of knowing exactly how things are going to play out with this chick. And if you treat her with disdain or keep her too much at bay, then maybe she might betray you later on down the line. It's like, appease everybody. But we know that it doesn't work that way. Still, trying to be the people pleasers here. So we have kind of a tentative, or rather tenuous friendship with her. And then Marjorie returns with pretty sour news. Joffrey's really not in the mood to extend aid to the Forresters. Big surprise there, okay? So Marjorie hopes that someday as queen she might be able to help more, but we all know the ambiguities that currently abound in that department, seeing as her queenship didn't really go the way as planned. But yeah, so the servant encounters Mira later after she talks with Marjorie again, saying that he's got people and he wants to help, and who knows, this guy could be the frickin' savior of the day. I'm as willing to bet on him as I am anybody at this point, because who freaking knows, okay? So then we go back to Ironrath, and that is where things hit the fan. So we decided to invite Ramsay into the Great Hall, which we knew he would not respect, a gesture that we knew he would spit on, but he would also spit on the gesture of having to be kept waiting at the wall, and he later reveals the error in our choice to invite him into the Great Hall, because he's like, oh, you just didn't want me to see how pathetic your army is, and blah, 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 blah. Oh Lord, did I forget how unpleasant of a fellow that man is, and just how eager I am to have his head on my own personal silver platter by the end of whatever, be that the game or the show. Ooh, does he need to go down? Because I am so many ways in which I am done with this very poor excuse for a human being. Scumbag. So he decides that he wants half of the Ironwood for Lord Whitehill. And we know that the Whitehills have very badly squandered their resources, and how well are the Forresters going to fare having a garrison in Ironrath, and everything just goes terribly, horribly downhill. And I knew in the back of my mind that the biggest problem with having Ramsay enter the Great Hall is that the entire family would be present, Lady Forrester and Talia and Ryan, and then Ryan gets taken. And when we had Ethan step in to protect Talia from Ramsay's grubby little mitts, that was when you get a knife in the neck, and it all just went really, really sour. Really bad. So, was there any way to have prevented that? Raise your hand if you made it out with Ethan still alive, okay? I'm putting mine down. Putting both mine down and squarely in my lap, because that was a mission disastrously failed. And I feel really bad. So, but that at the same time is the hallmark of brilliance when it comes to this series, is the fact that there is no right or wrong, because I'm sure that there would have been issues with meeting Ramsay at the wall, and maybe he would have, strong-armed his way in and attacked people anyway. Who knows? So it's like the big question was the problem the meeting place, the Great Hall, or being met at the gate? Was the problem having Duncan by your side as opposed to Royland, who I'm sure would have started offing heads the minute that Ramsay went for Talia? Or, it's like so many what ifs. And yeah, so we're trying to figure out if we want to go back and replay, or just go with the decisions that we've made now and just see how the entire course of the story runs. Which I think that we're going to do the latter, because in real life, you have to face your consequences. You don't just get to start over and say, well, I'm just going to rewind this whole thing here and make this set of decisions and see how it goes. So we are trying to deal with the world that we have wrought. But yeah, I'm really pleased that it wasn't too difficult to to get used to the new characters, to figure out who everybody was and who they're related to, and all those interactions. I feel that in like, it took us about 2 hours to get through the episode. We were able to do pretty well in that respect, like know who everybody was and how they all connected, and it made the very brutal ending that much more impactful. So how did things go down for you guys? I mean, let me know in the comments. Let us duke it out. Were you delighted or disappointed by this first episode, this first entry into Telltale's Game of Thrones? I really liked it, you know. I would give it at least a solid 8 out of 10 or so, you know, 8.5. I had a really good experience with it now. And I have resumed my need to go to Game of Thrones related therapy, which, you know, just all those things that awaken within the soul when dealing with this world. It was very good. I was very pleased. Very ambitious of Telltale to tackle this world, and so far I think they've done a very expert job of getting the story started, the ball rolling, and we'll see if we can attempt to not totally decimate the House of Forrester by the end of this. That's my only goal, is like, somebody's got to be standing. We do not want to subject the Forresters to what the Starks were subjected to, and not contribute to the domino effect of the Stark's death. That's really all I could ask for. All I want for Christmas is for the restoration of the North. Really, you know. Like, when you think about it, I think Santa is on the side of the North, the true king of the North, all that jazz. Like, he's up in the North Pole, you know, he's at the northernmost point of the world, and I'm sure that he would jive with what the Stark stood for, you know. So gotta get in the Christmas spirit, and you know, remember, the North will never forget, and winter is coming, and yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching this very long-winded review, but I wanted to go through it in as much detail as I could. So love you guys, and I will be back before you know it.